morning. This is David Smith speaking from the Geneva Business Insider, and today I have something completely new. This is the 27th of October, and I am for the first time interviewing myself instead of being interviewed by some of the very talented people I've met over the last few years. So we will see whether my talents are up to the task or not. My first guest today, and we're also talking about subjects completely different from the usual financial and economic matters, is Mr. John Hancock, who is a leading economist, Canadian citizen, studied history at Cambridge, and is now working for the World Trade Organization in Geneva. John, welcome to my show.
Great to be here. Thanks, David.
Okay, it's a pleasure. John, you and I are both going through very similar experiences at the moment in that we have daughters and they are about to enter the higher education system in university. My daughter being in the last year at school, and your daughter now just having started in the University of Royal Holloway in the UK. And I thought just for a change we might talk about that instead as a subject of interest to both of us for the futures of our children. What do you think of the system, how it works? What hopes do you have for your daughter in the future?
Well, it's a great subject, and as you say, I'm already embarked on this voyage of discovery. And the first thing I've discovered, David, is all these demands over the years to make education more user-friendly, consumer-friendly, demand-driven. It's worked. I'm not so sure, though, that we're going to be entirely happy with what we've created. My experience with the British university system so far is that there's vast energy now expended on trying to lure students into the programs, mission statements, advertising campaigns, making a huge deal out of accommodations, sports facilities, high-tech lecture halls. But I'm slightly worried that the content might have suffered, that it's like all marketing strategies. When they're too marketing dependent or too marketing heavy, you have to rob Peter to pay Paul, and I'm not so sure the spin in universities is translating into the output. That seems to be what my daughter is saying so far.
Looking at universities today, they've become vastly more expensive, and the whole educational process vastly more expensive than in the days of my youth, at any rate, where facilities were fairly basic and we just got by with what we had. But now we're looking at universities where they are using the students who are coming in and paying fees to pay for research for professors and academics who are already there, paying very large salaries for people who are on the administration side of universities, allowing entrance numbers to swell by a factor not of 1 or 2, but of 10. So the big question for the ordinary undergraduate is what kind of bang for his buck is he actually getting? Or more importantly, what kind of bang for the buck are the parents of these children getting who are having to pick up the bill? And of course the other aspect for privileged parents, let us call them that, who can pick up the bill, they absorb the cost. But for many other children whose parents are less privileged, the children will be saddled with a load of debt, and at the end of it trying to find a job in an increasingly difficult job market. Have you any thoughts on that?
That's a very good point, David. I mean, look, it goes with this whole demand-driven nature of higher education. I mean, somewhere along the line, these universities figured out that they're not institutions that stand apart from or above market forces and commercializations. They become corporate entities in their own account. They're selling education and they're trying to profit from it. And so what we're seeing in this evolving education landscape is probably what happens in most markets. The top universities are still in huge demand, and they will probably continue to be in huge demand as long as their brand stays strong and as long as education markets become globalized. I mean, if there's any falling off in demand for the Harvards and the Princetons in the United States, you can be sure the numbers will be filled for eager sons and daughters of Politburo members in China or whatever. But with this market segmentation, you also find that the second tier, or especially the third tier universities, maybe are going to be in a little bit of trouble, because what they're trying to sell students, come to our university, get a first-class education, and go on to get a job, is no longer a product that people necessarily believe in. It's not clear that you are any better off going to a mid-ranking, Midwestern American university and paying $50,000 than sitting at doing the same program online with MIT or with Yale or with Harvard with the top professor in the world for virtually nothing. It's that income segment, I think, that segment of the market that's going to be in a lot of trouble, and raises these kind of questions you asked. Is it worth it?
The other thing that's interesting, if you look at the percentage of people going to university, certainly in my youth, was 1 or 2%, which was the comfortable elites who found their way there anyway, plus the smart people who were useful servants to the comfortable elites once they actually learned the necessary skills. Now we're talking about university population being 25% of people who are leaving school go to university, and some do 2-year courses, some do 4. But by the time the person's finished a 4-year course, he is confronted once again with the problem of saying, how do I get a job? I need to do a PhD to get an entry-level job, where, 20 years ago this job didn't even necessarily require a university education. So what you're doing is you're creating a pyramid of expense, where the people who can pay the most for the longest time are actually pushing the people further down the scale out of a job, which they could perfectly well have done, simply because everyone is attributing a huge amount of value to this university diploma. The other aspect that I think is very curious is that how is it that universities, who basically are functioning increasingly like, as you say, a military-industrial complex. I mean, what we have here is an educational industrial complex in the same way as with a healthcare industrial complex. This entire structure is designed to be self-sustaining and above criticism. And of course, the best way to do this is to put yourself in a position where you are the one who is actually granting people the university diplomas. So in fact, what you're doing is you're perpetuating the clubbish cartel and not necessarily recognizing the talents of the individual student. Have you any thoughts?
Yeah, again, we're on the same page in this, David. Now we wonder, why are we sending our kids to university? But I completely agree with you. I mean, let's face it, universities weren't always what we now assume they are, which is sort of golden tickets to a great career. Once upon a time, a century ago, universities were elite clubs of the idle rich. You sent your sons, not your daughters, your sons off to be groomed at Oxford or Cambridge, and you didn't expect them to come out of that with a great career, because they didn't need a great career. They were landed aristocracy or scions of some commercial empire. They didn't need to worry about a job. The masses saw this and said, I want into that club too. And now that the masses are in, now that university membership or participation has gone from less than 3% of the population to over 50% of the population, it's lost its elite status. It's classic supply and demand. We're oversupplying the world with sociology graduates and undersupplying the world with masons and plumbers. Your other question is, when will market forces cut in, or when will this cartel? I suspect it already has, David. I think we're probably hitting this is the peak of the university, or the greatest extent of the bubble. My suspicion is that for a lot of these mass universities, the middle tier schools, these are going to shrink, and they're going to have trouble getting students. The students will wake up to the fact that they sit with $100,000 in debt and no job. Again, market forces will cut in. I think one final point to add on this, this changing nature of what we expect from universities. We also assume that the job of a university is to churn out workers, and that wasn't the objective of universities, at least in theory. The objective of universities was to educate someone and to open their eyes to broader ideas and debates. Maybe that doesn't actually create the greatest workers after all. I mean, maybe we're looking at these sociology and philosophy graduates and saying, you're not well trained to be a good cubicle dweller in a major corporation. Well, of course they're not. That's not what they were set out to be. They now question authority. They question ideas. They probably are products of a liberal education. It's just not clear that the modern world wants products of a liberal education.
I think, looking at my own experience, I studied law at university and came out, in fact, changed to chartered accountancy. Although, and the comments I have now apply to both, namely that I would in both instances have been put into a situation where I was earning nothing because an employer would be kind enough to take me on, saying, well, he maybe has the intellectual capacity to learn the job that I need him to do, but as of today he's worthless because I put him in front of a client or an assignment and he doesn't know what to do. So what universities seem to fail to prepare people for completely is any kind of practical application. And, if you look at technical schools or apprenticeships where people are actually obliged to put their hands onto something and repair a car, if that's what it is, or make a loaf of bread, or, write up a set of accounts for an accountant. All of these things are only learned after you've left university. So it is very difficult to assign a value added to a university in terms of it actually preparing you for the work environment. And from my recollections of university professors and lecturers, quite a number of them would be totally unsuited to any kind of normal work environment themselves. So it's very difficult to see how they could actually be the bridge to having a successful career. And the true power that a person has is the ability to do something which creates value added for which he is going to get paid. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts as to what universities might be able to do to address this issue.
Yeah, Dave,